Hello, everyone. How are we all doing? Come on in, sit on down. Welcome to another episode of the Truther Therapy Sessions. So, it's running a bit late. I won't apologise because it was mainly due to some family stuff I had to sort out first, and I'm not going to apologise for putting my family first. But I do have some good news, some announcements I want to make before we begin. And then we can get straight to it. I've got a guest with me today. He's waiting tentatively in the background for me to introduce him in. I think it should be a good talk. I think we should have a lot of things to discuss, and hopefully you guys can find a new channel to sink your teeth into after this as well. I don't mean that in a violent sense. You know, let's treat him well. I think this guy's got some great content. But first, I do want to make a few announcements. Let me just switch to my webcam so you guys can see me. So yeah, I'm not in my office. I'm in my kitchen in my new house. I have to do a bit of a last minute swap, which is why I'm a little bit behind, and then do some new audio setup. But what I do want to say is the Nephilim Look Like Clowns book is ready to go. So here are my two copies. Just this is a book reveal, a cover reveal. This is what it looks like. These are not for resale test versions. I got sent to myself to make sure everything was above board and working. But here they are, guys. The books are ready to go. They are going live on the 2nd of July. That's on Amazon. I cannot share any links right now. The links do not literally exist until the 2nd, when that's the official publish date. And you'll be able to purchase your copy of these books straight from Amazon. As you can see, they've come out quite well. They are a hefty-looking, decent-sized, width, weighty book. This is the hardback cover, which I think looks pretty cool. Cooler than I was anticipating. You know, and, you know, it's good. It's a good... I am surprised at the quality that this came out with. As you can see, it's a meaty book packed with information, all dedicated to the history of the clown costume, where clowns come from, how they're representations of demons. And this is Volume 1, The History, as you can see. Got my little logo in the bottom here. You know, I had some fun. With this. All completely designed by myself with some help from my lovely wife. I like it. You know, we got let's see here, we've got some cracked clown makeup in the background, also representative of the dry places in which the spirits dwell. We got the wide serpentine mouth, the red weird looking nose. I think this works. I'm happy with this. And yeah, guys, it's going to be available to purchase on Amazon on the 2nd of July. So there you go. Something to look forward to. I will be doing a publish stream, announcement stream, you know, and I'll be showing you everything where you can get it and what's going on there. For prices, for the hardback version, I believe I've set it currently at $39.99, I think. I can't remember. They kind of locked me in and I can't change anything. So I think right now for this, it's $39.99. And in full transparency, that's dollars. So that would equate to, I get $14 of that from the book after they take their royalties and all that type of thing. So that equates to £11. So I get about £11 for every book you buy, every one of these for now. And offers may come in the future, but that's pricing. That's what I set it at. So I actually get something back for my hard work. But that's for the hardcover. For the paperback, which looks just as good, just a little bit thinner, obviously. No different in color and quality. And I'm going for $29.99, so it'll be $10 cheaper. And I, again, after all costs and printing and everything else, I get about £10 for that. So there's the reasoning behind the pricing. That's what it's at currently. There will be a digital version eventually, but I'm not releasing that straight away. And that's for many reasons. Mainly to protect the content, because I know some pirates are out there who are just not willing to pay and will probably rip the whole thing into a PDF format and send it everywhere for free. You know, maybe in the future that won't be a problem, but while I'm just publishing the thing, not really interested in that happening. So I'm going to hold off on releasing the actual, you know, Kindle version, you know, the digital version, maybe for a few months, just so I can get people buying real hard copies of the book and leaving genuine reviews because they actually had to read the thing physically, you know. That's kind of another reason as well. I want people to be honest, you know. And that's it. So that's what's going on there. And I do believe the PDF version will be £10 cheaper at $19.99 when that does finally come out. And then in the meantime, I'm going to be working on an audio version. I'm going to be reading the book into this lovely microphone here, and that will also be released at some point in the future, in between me writing volume 2. So there you go, guys. Exciting stuff. That's what it looks like. I'm quite happy with it. Ignore the band across the middle; that won't be there. But yeah, look, a little picture of me on the back as well, and a self-aggrandizing little description of who I am, which I did not feel comfortable writing, but apparently that's what authors do. And don't worry, I've moved this up in the final version. This little line will not be hidden by this barcode on the real thing. That's why we order test copies. But finally, I've been given the get-go. It's been fully approved, quality checked by Amazon, and it will be published on the 2nd of July. So there's the first announcement. And I do have some extra good news as well, which I have been given the green light by my wife to share with all of you. Something fun, but we are expecting baby number 2. So what do you guys think? Boy or girl? I have no idea. We're leaning towards girl because it looks very different from my son's scan. The forehead looks flatter here, but they have all sorts of tricks to try and figure it out. But I'm not sure. I think it's a girl. We're going to find out in a week or two. I think we've got it booked maybe for the 10th to go and get it checked out. But yeah, there you go, guys. Some more good news. I'm having another baby. So exciting stuff in the Stobbs household. Book published, child along the way. And as usual, I'm going to go live with you guys now, and we're going to have a bit of a fun truther therapy session. So like I said, I have waiting in the rafters. I've got the Cult of Con. Now, this guy is a criminally undersubscribed channel. I came across him randomly, just looking for sermons, and I came across this thing called the Sunday Service, which is like his weekly show. And I listened to it, and I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty good listening. I enjoyed just chilling out in the background, having that on, doing my thing, and just listening to him talk. He's just got one of those voices. He reminds me, and I've said this to him himself, and I'm sure he has a good laugh about this, but he reminds me of Terence McKenna with the way he sounds. I don't know, it's just got that. Is it vocal burn or something? What's it called? I don't know what it is, but it reminds me of the day when I used to listen to Terence McKenna lectures back in my psychedelic days, but he's actually preaching the gospel and talking about Christ, which is, I don't know, maybe that's why I like it so much. But his message is great as well, and I think if you listen to him in his Sunday service, you guys will also appreciate his down-to-earth appeal. So I thought I'd get him on to share just his journey to creating a channel and what he does, and we'll get into a few of the maybe the more controversial opinions this guy has as well, and we'll talk it out. So let's see. Are you there, Connor? Can you hear me?
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to join me on the Truth or Therapy sessions. I appreciate it. So have you ever been or listened to one of these shows before? Do you know how this works?
Than usual, but yeah, I mean, I've been listening for a while. I've been a subscriber to your channel for probably 2 years or so now. Kind of at the peak of my investigation into truther stuff was when I discovered your channel. And I didn't actually know that you were the progenitor of the Nephilim look like clowns theories. I had seen it kind of going around in varying forms on the internet, and I eventually found my way to your channel. So really awesome content for sure.
Well, thank you. Well, tonight's about you anyway, so let's switch this around and talk about you. So, like I said, your channel, I just came across it, and you obviously you've been doing this for a while. You've been in the comments, but it just doesn't seem like you've gained any traction somehow. And I'm surprised. I'm surprised because you've got a great way of talking that is appealing to people, and I enjoyed your Sunday service. It's very relatable. I mean, people won't get this yet, but I am rooting for you to get that van that you have been keeping your eye on for so long, right? I really want you to get. I
The
want you
little
to get.
Nissan truck.
Yeah, I want you to get that truck. I really do. I'm praying that something happens so you can get the 12
It's
grand together to get that truck.
it's actually a funny story. Right now, what I'm driving is like same year, 2000. It's just a Camry, nothing fancy. I call her Blanca. And the funny thing about Blanca is before I got Blanca, I had like a really, really crappy Mazda that was like falling apart. The defrost didn't work, so the windows would fog up and you couldn't go where you were trying to go very easily. There was like a rag on the passenger seat that was like the windshield rag, you know what I mean? So it was not a good state. And I saw an old guy driving by. I was on a lunch break or something, and he was driving this little white Camry. It was the same car that I have now. And I saw it driving by, and I thought, that's going to be my car. Like it was like a weird, like a premonition almost. Like it was a feeling that I would have that car. Like kind of like a small blessing from the Lord. Like, we know you're struggling right now. It's tough, but you'll get a little leg up in a little bit. You know what I mean? And I wasn't that exact car, but it like kind of put a feeling on me like I need to look for that car because that's what God told me is going to be my car. And I found one. It wasn't far away. There's like 20 million of them in the US. So it's not like it was exactly rare, but I found one with super low mileage and picked it up for a good deal. I've had it for a couple of years. It's done a ton of great work for me, driving DoorDash and stuff, paying the bills in the past and before I got my current job. And there was a special feeling that came over me about it, like that I just knew I would have it. And it's funny that you bring up that truck because when I saw that truck, it was the same thing. It wasn't like, oh, I just really like that one. There's other 2000 yellow Nissan Frontier. Like I'm not even a guy who would think about yellow as my first choice, but something about that truck tells me that I'll just have it. And maybe putting this out here, like I could be wrong, but if it is the Lord's will for me to have that truck, like you guys will be the first ones to know about it. I'll immediately be rejoicing on the internet, be like, he's delivered the blessing. It's arrived. So we'll
Well,
see.
yeah. Well, the thing is, the idea is obviously on your channel, you use examples like these desires you have for like material things. For example, this truck, and you use that as an example of, well, what does it mean to desire material things from a biblical perspective? And you use these life moments to kind of trail off into these long sermons talking about these concepts from a biblical understanding. And I think that's why I can relate to all that stuff because I've also been there. I've seen things like that, and I've kind of not I suppose lusted after them is not the right word, but it's more
No,
like
but I know what you mean.
I
Yeah.
pondered over them longer than I probably should have as a Christian. You know what I mean? That type of thing. And I know it's like, oh, it's just silly. It doesn't matter. But there's always that thing, isn't there? Because this world is like that, and it kind of pulls you in. There's always something to pull you in. But still, I'm rooting for you to get that car. I really am. So,
Awesome, man.
so
We'll
tell,
see.
yeah, well,
We'll
we'll
see what
see,
happens.
we'll see. Yeah. So tell me, what was the thing that kind of pulled you into getting into the truther culture? What was your trigger point? Because I've always said in my show, there's always everyone has like a nexus moment where they woke up from the matrix, realized suddenly, wait a minute, I'm in the middle of a huge game here and a play, and I have no idea that there's a script running and I'm a part of it. Everyone has that moment, don't they? That weird, uncanny feeling of being in on stage and suddenly realizing, oh no, it's all bollocks. What was that for
Yeah.
you? What did that exactly?
Well, I think that for me, the experience is kind of unique. Not necessarily that no one else has had the same experience, but just that even as a young kid, I always kind of felt a little bit detached from reality. And that started with, my dad would tell us crazy truth or stuff while we were riding around in the van, and not really, like aliens and stuff like that, but biblical stuff. We were raised in the very beginning with a pretty strong, Christian theological background. And then, of course, as life went on and we got older, it got a little more complicated. As you start being more of an adult, you are expected to kind of delve deeper into the subjects. And then that's when you run into all the propaganda and the corruption and stuff like that. So, at first there was a general disconnect from the world just because, what you're taught in school is not exactly the same as what the Bible teaches. And so even as a little kid, I was always kind of like, well, what is reality? And I remember I was probably like 8, maybe 10 years old. And my brother and I were watching videos on the internet, just random YouTube videos. This was probably, 2000, early 2000s. And we discovered this video on YouTube that was, way back in the early days of YouTube, where it was just kind of like a free for all. The algorithm was like writing itself. And it was a video about the Nephilim. And there were these photos of excavations with, guys digging up giant bones. And the song that was playing on the video was, "Is There Anybody Out There?" from Pink Floyd. And it's like a really creepy song. As a kid watching those videos, or that specific video, and hearing that song and seeing those pictures, I mean, we even understood as kids that, photo manipulation existed, but I couldn't believe that every single one of those photos was fake. I mean, it was like dozens of pictures. At any one of those photos is real, that like destroys my entire version of reality. I'm like 8 years old trying to figure out, wait a minute, giants? I thought that was fairy tale stuff. But then over time, I got a little older, and those ideas kind of remained in my mind. But as I got into my teen years, I started getting into punk rock music, metalcore stuff, alternative style music and stuff. And those types of musics come with a culture, subculture generally, and punk rock specifically being the kind that, rejects the status quo, being, distrustful of the government, the authority, the media. That was kind of a sentiment of being a punk rocker. And I can't say that at 13 or 14 years old that I really like actually understood it, but it resonated with me. It was like, oh, you can't trust politicians, you can't trust the media. And so I went from kind of this little kid who didn't know anything, who felt a little detached, to then I kind of found comfort, like solace in that, because there were other people who felt the same way. Like, we're being lied to, things aren't the way they are. Excuse me, sorry. But as a teenager, you don't really realize what you're getting into. Punk rock is kind of a broken culture, at least in the modern age. Everybody's not everybody, don't get me wrong, but most of the culture is a lot of partying, drinking, doing drugs, sleeping around. It's a very worldly culture. So you can find solace in the ideological aspect of being a punk rocker, a rebel, whatever. But when I had to, quantify this with these people that, I've always been kind of sensitive in a way that, like, I didn't like doing bad things. I've never been somebody who was like, yeah, let's break stuff. So when you're around people that are like that, it's like, where do I belong? What's my identity? Who am I? If everyone I feel like associates with me isn't like me, they just say they think like I do, where do you go from there? So from there, I kind of closed off for a few years. So in my mid and late teenage years, I just said, I'm not going to worry about the big picture. I'm not going to stress myself out with all this stuff. I'm going to get a girlfriend. I'm going to play in a band. We're going to have some fun and party around and just have a good time. Try not to worry about it. Try to find a place where you fit in. And, there's a long story there about, I got headbutted in the face by a guy at our, debut performance, this band I was in. And it was kind of like a cheap shot. We had done our first show and sold a bunch of tickets. And one of the guys from the other bands came up. He's like, can I get a picture with you, man? And I was like, yeah. And he headbutted me in the face. And it broke my nose, and I had to get some surgery and stuff to fix my face. And I received a pretty significant brain injury. And I didn't know it. It wasn't that I had to be hospitalized for an extended period of time, but it affected me. It put me for a few years in kind of a weird state where I wasn't really thinking very much. I was just kind of going one day at a time. And, I kind of came out of that, 6 or 8 years ago now. And when I came out of that, I kind of had a lot of clarity where it was, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing here? And I didn't know where to start. And I can't say it was specifically this, but I did see a video once a few years ago. And it was an interview with Jim Carrey. And he was talking about how he had been an actor for, most of his adult life. He'd done tons of roles, major roles, And he said that he had found himself realizing that he was so well at taking on these new characters that it was really easy to leave behind Jim Carrey, that the character of Jim Carrey was just so thin that there was nothing really to hold on to. It would slip away so easily when he became somebody else. And so he started to question, who is Jim Carrey? Who really is that guy that everybody thinks I am when I'm not playing a role? And that really resonated with me, because I, even up until that point, I didn't know who I was, who is this guy? What am I doing here? And, people will tell you different things about who you are or what you are based on what they think. Our whole world is about giving you an identity, whether it's where you work or what you've accomplished or who your family is, where you live, what color you are. The world is constantly trying to tell you who you are. But I could never resonate with any of those. I just never felt like I liked any of those characters, And maybe that's just me being biased or whatever, but I want to like me. You know what I mean? I think we should all want to like ourselves. We should want to be somebody likable. There's a teacher that I listen to a lot. His name is Dr. Miles Monroe. He's passed away. He passed away in 2014, which is a tragedy, but a blessing, I even think he would say it was a blessing that he gets to be there, in the kingdom right now. And he would always teach the idea that our goal in life is to become a person of value. And that might be different for each person. But, in our most recent Sunday service teaching, I talked about responsibility and how it's our job to become a person of value, how we have an obligation to begin as the seed that God planted in our lives, the spiritual seed, and how it's our job to manifest into a tree and produce the fruit of the Spirit and the fruit of whatever it is that God is calling us to do in this world. So for me, it was just really resonant to hear, those teachings like from Miles Monroe saying stuff like, who you are is not what the world says you are. Who you are is not your flesh, your skin color, your religion, or your worldview, or whatever you came from. But that's just a construct that the world has created. We hear a lot of people talk about simulation theory and the Matrix and like, is the world real? And no, I don't think the world is real at all. Who we are is a spiritual being living a physical experience. We're in a physical world for a reason. God created all of us with a specific reason to be here, a mission, and we could spend all of our lives wondering what that is, but if we aren't willing to take responsibility for that pursuit, then we may go all of our lives without ever finding it, without ever accomplishing what it is that God has called us to do. So I don't know. I'm just rambling right now.
No,
But
no, that's great.
that's basically how Sunday service works. I'll think of something that has impacted me in my life, like, for instance, like this truck. And then I have to think to myself, if something's so impactful, like, what's the right way to think about this? Is it okay to want an old truck? Yeah, as long as your heart's in the right place about it. As long as it doesn't become an idol for you, as long as it doesn't take all of your time and attention. If you don't put the important things behind that, then it's okay to like a truck. I mean, if you think about it, Christianity does a lot of trying to convince people to follow Jesus. A lot of people are trying to tell other people, like, this is what you'll get if you join the club, you know what I mean? And a lot of charismatic teachers, they preach that you'll have access to all this wealth of the kingdom, like as if you'll automatically be made rich. And, maybe to an extent, there's some truth to that. Like, there is a great amount of wealth available to people who enter the kingdom, but it's not something that you can, Christ says to seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. And I think that we tend to go after the goods without going after the source. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think Christ knows that we have an inclination to desire for power, for money, for authority. That's why he performed miracles in front of the people. He wanted them to see that he was the real deal. But he also wants us to remember that accessing that stuff and using those resources comes with a price. And that price is our allegiance. We think that we can just tell God to give us stuff when we want it. Like most recently, my car was breaking and I had to do some repair process. And I would have rather it just been magic. I'm driving. I'm like, oh, Lord, please don't let my car leak. It's burning oil and it's like stinking. And it's just embarrassing and problematic. You got to be able to get to work. And you want to just say, God, just fix my car. And it's like, there's more to life than just having everything done for you by God. If it was God's will for everything to be easy, then we'd never grow. We'd never learn. I talked about how in our most recent episode, the process of growth requires access and exposure to resistance. Like if you're a tree, the winds blowing on you as a sapling are what strengthen your stalk. You know what I mean? And that's part of why the Lord does these things. Like, am I better now for having done my valve cover repair 3 times? Yes. What was the lesson? I don't know. There's a few lessons. First of all, don't cut corners. That's the first lesson. Don't think that you can take something complicated and make it simple. Maybe that's not the first lesson. That's the earth lesson. The spiritual lesson, I don't know, lean not on your own understanding. Sometimes the Lord has a plan for us that involves us getting a little bit roughed up, but it makes you stronger in the end. So that's kind of the inspiration for this most recent Sunday service, I guess we would call the responsibility episode.
Well, you were on a roll there, weren't you? But yeah, no, that was a.
Sorry, I'm hogging up all the time.
No, that's exactly what I've got you on for. And to be honest, I could listen to you talk for hours. And I think a lot of people here can as well, and that's kind of your style. It's what you do. And you're clearly a very introspective individual who does look at the world around him and his own existence and think. And that's kind of what more people do need to be doing. And I think you basically, your journey seems like a journey of understanding purpose or meaning or trying to find a way to be valuable. I think is something how you described it there, finding value in existence, or you're making your existence at least something that people could consider as a life that was worth living in some respects. And I do think the Christian belief and understanding and perspective of life can give people that meaning and that purpose and that existence that
Yeah,
basically doesn't require you to pursue the heights of business hierarchies or something like that, or to have the biggest house, or to gain the nicest car necessarily. That's not what you strive or drive for once you have a Christian foundation for what it means to have purpose. Like you said, it's to keep your eyes focused on the kingdom first, and
right.
then everything else will be given to you from that process. And it's kind of a humbling or denial of self type situation, isn't it? And like I said, you cover a lot of this in your own sermons, which I think are really great. But yeah, your story's interesting. It's an interesting one. I can relate a lot to it. It sounds like being a part of subcultures, but never really feeling like you were really a part of it. Do you want
Right.
to maybe expand on that feeling, or do you have anything more you want to say about that before we move on?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I would say is that it relates a lot like how I was talking about what Jim Carrey was feeling, where you're just taking on roles. It's never authentic. When I sit here and I talk about Christ and I talk about the kingdom and how that has affected my life and how that has changed me on a real fundamental level, I'm not just a Christian. I call myself a Christ supremacist. I mean that. And to me, that means something different. It means more than just accepting God into, accepting Christ into your heart and saying, I'm a Christian now. That there are a lot of people who check the box that say Christian on the sheet of paper, but God never crosses their mind, and I'm not trying to say that people are wrong for being less or more zealous. I'm just saying that I'm very zealous. So much so that it's the only thing that really makes sense to me anymore, because I can't just have a small talk conversation with somebody at work about whatever. I just can't do that anymore. In the last few years of my life, it's almost like a blessing and a curse at the same time. There's there's nothing left of the old me to hold on to. Like, I don't even know who Connor is. I only know this guy now. I call him Con Man because that's like a nickname I've had all my life, but it's all just temporary. I never thought I would get to a point where I believed in my heart that if I died right now, it would be a good thing and not be like miserable and depressed about it. How can you say that? How can you say joyfully, if this house got hit with a something from the sky, I'm not gonna say a meteor, but like a plane or something, like if that happened and I disappeared at this moment, I know that I would be in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do know that, and that's a strange feeling. I used to struggle with like wanting to be here, and I don't necessarily want to be here now, but it's like I'm here for a reason, just like you. And so until we accomplish that, I'll be right here.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a brilliant way of putting it, to be honest. And I think along that vein, I think I've said something similar. It's kind of like you can live your life free will, do what you want. You can make the choices you want to make. You can join the groups you want to join. You can live the life you think is best for yourself, and have a good go at it, and God will allow you to do that. But He also has a life for you that you want already mapped out, and you don't even know you want it. He's already got it kind of already laid out for you. He knows who you are. He knew who you were before you even came here, and it's kind of, if you should so align yourself with His will in a sense, and it is kind of like bowing down to a king. It's a kingdom at the end of the day, and it's not leaning on your own understandings necessarily, but giving it over to the king to deal with it and show you the way, which is what
Right.
truly this is all about. And I think pride does not really allow many people to want to be ruled by a king, so I think a lot of people struggle with that. But I realize, and I struggle with this myself for years, but when you finally do give yourself over in that way, you start to get the life you actually realized you wanted. You didn't realize that was the life you wanted, and things do start to come your way, and your rewards are there if you should follow the correct path and the way, and follow, to the best of your abilities, at least the basic of the Ten Commandments, but also to
Yeah,
have,
exactly. Right.
just to have that in your hearts, that belief, that faith, that of the truth, you
Yeah, I
find.
think the most.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was done. I was done. You go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I think the most important part of this whole journey is the desire to seek Christ. I know so many people, I've come across so many people in my life who are Christian identifying, but they don't really mean it. And I always tell my buddy, I have a good friend who came to the Lord over the last couple of years. He's probably watching this show now. Hey, buddy, how you doing? He's our resident recluse. He's like social media guy for my channel, so he's going to be busy probably after this. But anyway, he's somebody who was afraid of Christianity because it's always been so like Bible bashing and that this is the way that you have to do it and whatever. And there's so many people who attend churches who they follow the protocol because they have to, not because they want to. And I always just say to people, like, don't pretend, don't fake it, because it's only you and God in this situation. Nobody else can see the state of your spirit. Nobody can see the darkest corners of your heart. Only you know that, and the Lord knows that. And so it's between you and him. You have to work on that. You can look at somebody and make all the judgment you want, but you'll never be able to know the state of their heart. And so that's why I tell people, don't pretend. If you really mean it, from there, the Lord can do so much with you. If you have a willingness to let him do it, that's I think it's just not worth, counterfeiting. It's the reason why I have a problem with like evangelism, because, Christ tells us that God calls us to him, that he calls us to his presence. He finds us in our place of darkness and calls us. And it's not to say that we shouldn't be trying to teach people who are willing to listen. We don't want to cast our pearls before the swine, but we should know the word. We should know the Bible. We should know esoteric stuff, demonology. We should know the realm that we've been sent here to be a part of for whatever reason. And I just think that if we as a group were more serious about it, where we considered this to be the real state, the war for eternity, essentially, that we've been embroiled in, if we take that seriously, we're much more effective in our ability to learn and grow in our capacity, like our understanding of the application of this knowledge and our ability to influence other people. What evangelism does and what the modern church system does is it teaches churches to water down the gospel to make it marketable to people. It teaches people to propagate ideas that are false because it keeps people coming back. And our goal is not to keep people coming back. Our goal is to declare the truth and to stand firm in that. I think about the concept of patriotism. It's very big in America. It always has been. And there are different varying ways that people feel like pro-America over the years. And I grew up kind of in the post 9/11. I was kind of a young kid, teenager during that era. And they were just ramming this pro-America patriotism. So I saw a lot of that. And as a kid, I would see people who weren't from America, foreigners who moved here, and they wouldn't salute the flag during the morning thing. And that always made me really mad because I had this national patriotism idea in my mind as a kid, because of the propaganda. And so the reason I was mad was not because of the arbitrary flag. I understood what the values of America were supposed to be. It was supposed to be like freedom and all that stuff enshrined in the Constitution. But I would get mad at people who weren't like in allegiance. And it was because I was like, well, why are you here to reap all these benefits, but you don't care about what brings those benefits to pass? And it was because I was immature in my thinking. America, it's just a nation of men. It's a government of men. We decided these are the rights God gave us, but we need people to ensure that those rights exist. And as far as that goes, it's had its good and it's had its bad, and people could say what they want about it. But my patriotism, my pledge of allegiance is not to any flag or nation anymore. I think that those of us who really know Christ realize that his kingdom transcends the different flags, the different races, the different religions, the different buildings. One they call a mosque, one they call a cathedral. We know all about this as people who, explore the millennial kingdom stuff. They were all one kingdom, one culture. And now it's, you get this over here, you get that over there. They've taken all the truth that we had, split it up into a bunch of pieces and divided it all around the world. And now we're all at odds with each other. Nobody can put the puzzle together. That's, I think, a tragedy. But it's also an opportunity, It gives us a chance to put ourselves to the test, to challenge what we're willing to believe. And I always say it's like everything that we come across is a piece to a puzzle. It may not be the puzzle that we're working on. It may not be the right piece, but as long as we gather it, dust it off, clean it up, and put it in for storage, it could be valuable later. I can't begin to tell you how many times I heard somebody jotting off some theory, arrogantly declaring what they thought was real on the internet. And then I was like, that guy, he doesn't know what he's saying. And then sometime later, I'm humbled because it's like, I think he was right. And that happens a lot. And as long as we're willing to say, I don't have to know everything, I just have to know I'm going the right direction. And I know that the right direction is the direction of the guy who's painted on the walls of all those buildings. You know what I mean? I see people sometimes questioning, like, is Christianity just another construct of this reset, this deception, this whatever, this little season? And I can see why people would do that. Like, I could see why people would think, like, oh, all the religions are made up. And I mean, in a sense, they are. They're used to control us. They're distorting the truth. But there really is a king. He really is the guy. And that's, to me, I can be patriotic about that. And that doesn't put a wedge between me and anybody else who thinks that too. You know, you from the United Kingdom, I'm from the United States, but we're both kingdom citizens, members of Christ's kingdom. And that transcends our nationality. You know what I mean? So I think that's really important.
Well, I think that might be a good segue for you to explain the flag behind you, because people are a little bit sus about that in the comments. So I'll
Oh,
let
yeah.
you
Okay,
take
well,
that away.
as you can see, that's just a cross, standard Christian cross. I thought about doing an Orthodox one, but I'm not really an Orthodox guy, and I wouldn't want them to think I was disgracing their sacred iconography. So this is the flag of the Christ Supremacist album, which is the album art for my up-and-coming studio album, which doesn't have a release date yet, but is well underway. I'll probably have an announcement about that in the near future, so stick around for that. So basically, the reason why I did this is because when I decided I was really serious about Jesus, I thought there's no way you could have racial supremacy, right? Because I even heard Joe saying it on one of the other Truth or Therapy sessions, where Christ is really clear that there is no free or slave or Jew or Greek, you know, and there may be some crazy truth about anthropology and the royal bloodlines, and that's one of those things we go dig into that. I encourage people to learn. But what really matters is the nation, Christ's kingdom. And so when I say I believe in Christ, I think he is the king of the world. He was resurrected from the dead. He is still alive. I have not heard any indication that Christ is not still alive and ruling the earth in whatever capacity. You know, it's his plan. And so because of that, my allegiance is to Christ. So if there's a supreme being, a supreme thing, it's him. It's not this race or this creed or that creed. It's him. And so that's what it means to be a Christ supremacist, to believe that the highest being, the highest order is Christ. And the reason why I took or stole or whatever you want to call it, the inspiration of this iconography and the colors and everything is because a great tragedy occurred some 80 years ago, following a prior great tragedy. And to me, it all reflects on the same struggle. We see the great wars and the wars that especially the United States has been involved in over the years, and we always look at them as individual wars because we break it down like World War II, and then within the umbrella of World War II are the separate battles and the separate historical events that took place. But I think that we as a human race need to realize that World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, whatever, Afghanistan, these are all microcosms of the big war, the original war, the war that began in heaven, the war against the Watchers and their kids, the ongoing war with the kingdom of Babylon or Satan or whatever you want to call it. You know, the enemy's kingdom is at war with ours, and that's the real war. So when you look at something like World War II and you see the tragedy that takes place, I see it as like an opportunity again to seize control of something that was taken from us. Like how once upon a time the rainbow meant a promise that the earth would never be flooded again by God. And now they've taken it and they've corrupted it and they've made it into this pride, what God calls an abomination, pride, and they've stolen it. And like with many symbols of ancient origin, they've been repurposed and changed, just like our buildings and our history and our stories. And I see this as an opportunity to take something that people, they see it and it invokes this shock, and it's disturbing, you know? And I want people to feel like that. I want people to question. I want people to talk. I want people to think. Because what a swastika means in India, that's not what it means over here. Why? You know, I can't tell you. I mean, I could, but I'm not here to give a giant history lesson. I'm just here to say that we have to be willing to question everything if we're going to find the truth. And part of that is finding out what the truth is and then standing on that. You know, if this could be a swastika and mean something different, it would be. because I know what the swastika is. It's an ancient symbol. It predates any Nazi, and anyone who opens a history book could know that. But
Hmm.
the problem is that we have been so wholly lied to in this time, in this little season. And I know that we can't necessarily say on day one, we're taking it all back, but I see it as chances to chip away. We may not be the one who solves the problem. I don't really believe that anything I do will fix the world. I'd love to. I'd love to see the world healed and made right. But I know that that's God's plan. That's his will. And when the time comes for him, he will do it. But I don't want to be like missing the chance to do everything I can. You know what I mean? I'd rather err on the side of being too zealous and have to slow myself down than do nothing and have to be talked into action. You know what I mean? I feel like what our problem is as Christians in the modern world is that we're very quick to brush our hands of everything because we're not allowed to do that. We're the good guys. You know what I mean? And it's like how you mentioned earlier, people are scared of the idea of living under a monarchy because the idea of like absolute rule is so terrifying. But then I ask people, especially in the United States, I ask, do you actually have any power today? Like when you look at the state of the world, it doesn't matter whose side you're on. Are you on the side of Ukraine? Are you on the side of Gaza? Are you on the side of Israel? Are you on the side of Russia? It doesn't matter because our money goes to blow people up. Is there any Christian in this country that believes that we should blow people up? And if so, who? Who should we be blowing up? I feel like so many people are like just turning a blind eye to it. And it's what our country does. We're like the biggest military spending war machine in world history, at least as far as we know. And everybody just goes to the store and buys groceries and doesn't even think about it. I started this journey a few years ago, like 10 years ago, seeking truth, discovering the shape of the earth, learning about the spirit of the kingdom through Miles Monroe's teachings, and then going into your teachings about the Nephilim looking like clowns and demonology and the millennial kingdom stuff was absolutely pivotal. And all of this stuff has just kind of led me to believe that this is a very pivotal time in history. Like we've all been awoken for a reason for this time. And I may not know the exact course that God wants us to take, but I'm super willing. And I want to encourage people to feel the same way. I want people to have a willingness to do what God asks, even if it seems crazy.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, no, great explanation. I mean, I empathize with what you're saying there with the whole reclaim these old ancient symbols that represent, the movement of the Big Dipper in the sky next to also the symbol of
Yeah.
the sun and the rest, and these obviously the Buddhist symbol, it's an Indian symbol, it's a Hindu symbol, it's actually in every culture ever, it's a Celtic symbol. That
Yeah,
symbol of
exactly.
the swastika
Ancient.
was used for nefarious purposes by people who are part of nefarious cults and is forever tainted and can never be seen for what it truly was. And I'm all for reclaiming symbols and using them for our own purpose. I do it with conspiracy theorist. Used to be a slur. I'm saying I say it with
Yeah,
pride. I am a conspiracy theorist. It
exactly.
says under here, my pronouns, truth, a theorist. That's what I am. Again, I think there's no shame in admitting what you actually are. And like I said, not a racist. You're a Christ supremacist. There's a difference. Okay.
Yeah.
I think doesn't Owen Benjamin say he's a height supremacist or something like that? And
I
it's
could
kind
I could stand to have a few extra inches. I mean,
of,
not bad at all.
but I just think it's again it's probably good just to clear that up for people who are listening. And I'm all for it, and that's fine if you want. But it's one of those things I've noticed on my channel. It's kind of years ago when I was first starting out. I got into all that type of research and that type of thing, and clearly
Oh
seeing
yeah.
the agendas which are purposely being played against Europe and Europeans, and I saw it all, and in many ways I'm living it too because I'm a part of the mass
Hmm.
migration and seeing the impacts of my local communities and this type of thing. And it's something early on in my walk when I first came to Christ, and it's one of these subjects I got very angry about. I did get passionately angry about these things, and to the point where it was changing me inside and making me hateful of certain groups and factions and individuals.
Hmm.
And I even had a moment where I had an issue with a flag, shall we say. In my old videos, I used to have the Union flag behind me, the British flag, just normal British flag, okay, standard, not the Red Cross, but just the Union Jack, the maritime
Blue
version.
and
You
red
know,
and white. Yep.
yeah, I just used to have it in the background. No
It's a
thanks.
nice flag.
Yeah,
Over here in America, we say that as like that's cool if you guys have that on your car or whatever.
well, yeah, it's very very royal family reminiscent type thing, whatever. And it's not like I was particularly proud of country necessarily, because I had the same thoughts and ideas. It's just a nation run by men. Ideally, it's God's kingdom that's more important over any of this. But there is this desire and pull for us to have that national identity and go along with the crowd and that. And I think it's just built into every culture and every. It doesn't matter what country you come from. It's kind of to
Sure.
feel like it's the home team. It's kind of built into us naturally to go that way, and then to be able to learn about these dark agendas, which just seem to be purposely aimed towards us. It got me angry. And I remember,
Mm.
I had to go off YouTube for 5 years. Because I just got promoted to be a manager at a supermarket, and my boss sat me down and he was saying, I found your channel type of thing. And he's
I
saying,
can't do it.
he's like, you can't have this channel and be a manager. You're gonna have to step down or get rid of the channel. And he was talking about some things that, first of all, me making videos against people purposely pushing pedophilia, which I thought was dodgy that I had an issue with that, But I was embroiled in some battle between some MAP people, minor attracted persons, who were purposely pushing it on students in school, and I made a video ousting them, and then next thing I know, it got 30 dislikes overnight, instantaneously, and it's kind of like, oh, so you got your class to go and mass dislike the video, did you? It's that kind of thing. So I was getting angry
Yeah.
about, I was angry about this.
Basically.
I was angry about the crazy mass migration issue and the degradation of the Western value, all that type of thing, and I was becoming more and more angry. And one of the things he said to me is, well, you've got that British flag in the background as well. I was like, are you kidding me? I'm not allowed to put the British flag in the background. And it's,
Right.
and he was saying, if what you talk about could offend staff, and if they do get offended, you understand we're a diverse multicultural company, right? And they were like, and I was getting more and more like, are you joking? Here it is finally happening to me, this whole situation is like, if any of them complain, Paul, we're not going to be able to defend you. Like, so
Right.
we're doing this to protect you. We just we have your interests in best heart. We don't want you to get in trouble, because if someone complains, we're not going to be able to help, Paul. It'll make us look bad, and it's kind of yeah. So in the end, I capitulated in a moment of weakness I'm not proud of, and I shut the channel down. I just made every video hidden. I didn't delete everything. Some of it then slowly got taken down by YouTube themselves, and videos just started disappearing, because that's what they do. But I took those 5 years to really reflect. And in hindsight, it's kind of like, maybe God was actually doing that for a reason. I learned a
Mhm.
lot through those 5 years. I learned how to be a manager of people. I learned a lot about people and how internal politics works in companies, in upper management, and what people's drives and desires are, what the general public is like. It grounded me to understand what people who don't think about these things are doing on a day-to-day basis, because I interact with hundreds of them every day, solve their problems because I'm the manager. And it's kind of, I learned a lot. I also got to save money. My life got better. I've got experience that'll take me forever now, and these type of things. So I think it was good for me to take that break. And it also gave me a chance to reflect on my values and what it is I actually care about and what I need to get my attention on. And I realized that focus on my nation, flags, immigration, clergy plan, all that stuff, everything that comes under that umbrella. I empathize. I know it's real. I can see
Mhm.
it, but it's not where our focus should be. It's
Exactly.
worldly stuff, and it's there to get you angry and upset
Mhm.
and pissed off and riled up and defensive and against one another and me against them. And it's kind of like, I don't care what religion you are, whether you're atheistic, communistic, or Muslim, or whatever. I don't, whatever the enemy was, from that direction. You're just a human being who needs to be saved, and that's fun.
Yep.
I learned that, and it's kind of, I don't.
100%.
So it's never become a point of my channel, but I'm empathetic towards those who do that type of thing, because the
Mhm.
problem is, like, those type of things are quite literally affecting people on a personal, fundamental level in their local neighborhoods in a
Mhm.
visceral way. So I get why they're angry, but it's getting banged from YouTube bait as well. So I've got to kind of avoid it for that reason too. Maybe
Yeah.
that's just
Like
another
how
thing.
much effect can you have if you're muted? You know what I
Exactly.
mean? You're not allowed to speak. You have a spot, you know what I mean, between your Nephilim clowns research and theology or whatever theories and such, and then also your millennial kingdom discussions, ruminations, etc. Both of those things are incredibly valuable. This is kind of what I talked about when you first shouted out my channel. I started getting subs, and it was like, thank you, Paul, for shouting out to me, but also don't want to be a cause for you to end up in any trouble, because I'm a little bit more of a, I have much less to lose, I guess you could say. So that kind of causes me to be a little less careful. So I have to think, I have to be a bit more careful. But it's like you said, sometimes God like puts us on pause for the best. You know, my YouTube channel's like a year old. It's not that old, but my Sunday service is only like 2 or 3 months old. I think we have 18 episodes. That's 9 hours approximately of content, but that's 18 weeks that I've been doing Sunday service. So when I first started the Cult of Khan, it was exactly what you were talking about. I was mad about the state of the world. I was angry that it seemed like nobody cared, like nobody was drawing attention to the way things are being deliberately done to destroy our lives, our culture, our history, whatever. And I was so angry about it and impassioned. And like there was a 5 minute intro, and it was like, "It's a world of shit, and you deserve me." And it was like it was like because I was just gonna be on here ranting about how bad everything is and how we have to fix it and we have to do this to fix it and we gotta bring back the death penalty and all this. And it's just, I realized just like you that our fight is not against flesh and blood. You know what I mean? It's the rulers and principalities and high places, and we don't fight them by playing their game. You know, they want us to look at rage bait on the internet, get mad about whether the cops were justified or not, or whether the border is secure or not, or all of those things. They do matter, like you said. They are affecting people in real life. But are you the guy with the lever of power? Like, has the Lord made you king yet or not? You know what I mean? Like, if you or I were declared king of the earth right now by Christ, then you could care about the border. You could care about, you could address those things. It's kind of like what I was talking about with responsibility. What are we responsible for, and are we owning it? And that's kind of where our heart should be. Like for you, like if you have a family, house, car, stuff like that that you are responsible for, that you do have a say in, that's what we're supposed to be looking at and putting our energy into, what we can manage, you know.
No,
So I
absolutely,
agree.
absolutely. Again, it's one of those topics like I do have empathy for those who are involved with all of that. And I think a
Absolutely.
lot of rebuttals I get about the idea of not talking about it is, oh no, well they want weak, passive Christians who won't do anything. You know what I mean? And that's working for them. And it's kind of like, God's actually in control of what nation does and does not get what they deserve or get these things put against them. God appoints every king on earth. It's all done through His will. And it's kind of you're not in control of that. I think there's like there's a savior complex to a lot of people, especially if you're involved in the what was coined the alt-right movement, which isn't a really biblically based movement, but it's kind of like the controlled opposition to the far leftist communist movement. You get the
Yeah.
alt-right movement, and these commentators are quite literally riling up a left-right paradigm war. And it's very much of a you need to save your nation, your culture, your history. You need to save these things. And what I've been discussing on my channel is that these cultures you think you have are just literally brand new and probably not even real anyway.
I
They're like the fabricated constructs, like you say, created to cover up a false history, create a false history that makes you believe that Christ hasn't been here for 1,000 years. So when you start getting really above all of it and start focusing on like godly things, you start really just transcending that base left rightism that's
Yeah,
everywhere.
there's just no time for it, right? Like, how can you
No.
get involved in all that? They had the debates the other day, and it was like I was off work, but I didn't have time to watch it. I got other stuff. I got a real life that needs to be worked on. If we get all upset about that left right thing is amazing. It's just like what you said. It's like how it's worth discussing in a sense in the right environment, but like on an actual like fundamental level, I was kind of more of a conservative person up until I threw the whole thing away, but it's like you get caught up in the left right democracy argument about who gets to be what, vote them in, whatever, and you don't realize that the entire exchange of arguing over who and then voting for who, that's all liberal ideology. The idea of having a say, like being a voting party, a regular person, like voting and having an impact on the political sphere in your world, like that's pretty liberal. It's not a traditional what you could call a right-wing way of thinking. So here are all these groups that are alt-right by the label because of the way they act. They're antagonistic or they're anti-leftist, but they're not truly right-wing at all. They're almost like a straw man, because if they were really right-wing, they wouldn't be encouraging anybody votes in any elections at all. They'd say, oh, well, the only government that's right is monarcho. Like that is truly politically to the far right would be fascism or monarchy, like extreme totalitarian control. And it's actually interesting because we were talking about earlier that people are afraid of being under a monarchy, but they don't really realize that in the United States, it's essentially that. It's an oligarchy of rich elites that have absolute control over our lives. And, they can't take away your spirit. They can't control your brain. But if the IRS in America decides, you just have to pay them. And the general public would think, if you were killed in a standoff in your house against the IRS, well, you should pay your taxes, man. Like, that's how people think. So it's not worth dying in the front yard to the IRS. That's what I'm getting at. Like, you're not going to change the world by thrashing around on YouTube about the truth of World War II. And I'm glad that there are people that are taking their time to do that. But it's kind of like, do you want to know the truth of World War II? You'll go and find it. No one's going to convince you. You're not going to watch a documentary from Zoomer Historian and all of a sudden change your worldview. Maybe.
Well,
I do like that channel though.
Exactly. Well, on that concept, you were hinting there, that if someone wants to find these things, they'll go and find it. But if they don't, then they're happy just to play along with the script and the story. There's nothing you can really do to change that. You can be a beacon that can attract them in some way, and even then, when they get to you, you can only point them to the truth, which is over there. It's Christ. Go check it out. And even then, they have to. You can take a horse to water, but we know the rest. It's that kind of thing. How have you found? When you did start really getting into these things, did you try to tell your friends, tell your loved ones, tell those people closest to you, and how did that go? Can you describe that process?
Actually, it's I'm glad you asked me that. So when I first got onto really weird stuff, I mean, most people that I knew, they knew that I was already like a kind of conspiracy theory, anti-government, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to say that. That could be a wrong implication, but you know what I mean? Anti-establishment or a critical thinker at the least. People knew that I was that way, but when it came to the really crazy stuff like the shape of the earth or stuff about like the millennial kingdom or demon stuff that's like not, white bread church stuff. That was where I found trouble. I have an uncle he's a pastor, and he's like my great uncle. He's in his 70s, and his dad was a pastor, and his dad, my grandpa, was like the patriarch of the family, and he was a part of the Seventh-day Adventist church. And so when he passed away, Jack became my uncle became the head of the family, the big patriarch of the family. And when I first kind of got out of my teenage young adult rebellion and really decided I wanted to be a Christian, he caught wind of it and was like, oh, let me fly you out to Texas. And because, understanding when you first come to Christ, you're pretty fragile. I think he knows that after being a pastor for 40 years or whatever. And I think that it was his intent to kind of like help me get some foundational stuff so that I didn't just fall off immediately. And he was really good to me. I spent about a week there. And he partnered me up with a guy there called Joseph, who was another young guy who was kind of freshly really coming to Christ for real. And we had a couple of weeks of correspondence. And after I went back from Texas, I was really like a honeymoon Christian. Like I was like wearing a suit around and like praying for people in public. I was really, I think the honeymoon's an okay way to describe that. But anyway, I was just so excited for anything. Like, let's get some truth. Like, let's go. And so my heart was really pure. Like, Christ tells us to come to him like a child. Like, that was my heart, was like, oh, I just want to know everything he has. And just how can I do what he wants me to do? And I discovered, I don't remember who it was, but by now there's probably 8 or 10 really good documentaries about the shape of the earth. Like, if you're a critical thinker at all, it's a case closed after you've seen like 10 hours of this stuff. It's like, okay, I know. Because it's on one hand, the people who tell you the alternative are all complete liars. And then on the other hand, you have like plenty of physical evidence to confirm. But once I had determined that I thought the shape of the earth was different than what we've been told, I brought it to Jack. I was like, this is so exciting. Look, we got to talk about this. The church needs to know. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't realize it was about to be like, oh no, it's a war. Like, they will not let you talk about it. And I didn't realize that there was even an institution like telling you no. Like, if for instance you're a 501c3 church in America, you can't start preaching radical ideas in your church or they'll take your tax exempt status away. And I didn't know that. I just thought you could just be a church. Like, will the Cult of Khan be 501c3 tax exempt? I doubt it. So that's kind of, for me, that's my deciding factor. I hate to say that because there's tons of good churches. I always say, if I make a blanket statement about churches or Christians or Americans or whoever it is, as long as you know that you're not the person in that umbrella, then no, I'm not talking about you. You know, like if I say all these Christians want to do is this, well, if you don't do that, you're not guilty of it. Don't worry, I'm not talking about you. I'm only talking about the people who are guilty. But unfortunately, a lot of churches in America are guilty of, like I mentioned earlier, watering down the gospel or just flat out refusing to address certain things because money. You know what I mean? There's money to be had or lost. And so that's unfortunate. But yeah, when I brought up the alternative worldviews that I had started to just delve into, I didn't even really believe it per se. I just thought, you need to look at this. And I was met with a sort of, I think it was a calculated response. I think emotionally he would have been more mad. And there are others in the church and stuff I've had this conversation with, and it's the same. They've thought out what they're going to say to you before they say it because they don't want to seem like they're unstable or they're not, steady in what they think. And what I've been told is that it's not relevant. That's when it comes to millennial kingdom, when it comes to the stolen history, the implications about like cymatics and all the sciences of the world, that it's not even like, we call it esoteric, but it's really just other fields of science. It's not necessarily magic or evil. It's just we're not discussing it, but it's God's world. It's the mechanisms of his world. How does it work? And if you start exploring into those things, the church is not familiar, and they don't want to talk. They don't want to be exposed as having no idea what they're talking about. So they'll tell you that it's not relevant to the story. Your focus needs to be the gospel and Jesus. And yes, it does. But, at some point you have to be more than just a kid at Sunday school. We know that Jesus came to die for our sins, but why? What is here what do we need to be saved from? These are questions that I don't really think they're not often discussed in the church. It took me a while to realize that what we are needing to be saved from is like an army of essentially interdimensional evil aliens that are trying to destroy us. Like, that's a pretty big thing to need salvation from. And nobody ever told me that, but realizing that it puts into perspective why there's so much effort spent trying to take away our identity and distract us and give us this false reality to live in.
Were you welcome back at these churches after talking about these things?
No, I don't. Yeah, that's the thing. I never really was a full-fledged member of a church, but every time I've tried to kind of, because that's where the ripe ground is. If somebody already believes in Jesus and then you want to teach them this stuff, I think it's way better to have a foundation in Christ. When it comes to like the millennial kingdom thing, it's amazing how the Lord did that to me. I was pretty freshly dedicated to Christ. I knew that the earth was different than what they told us, and so I had kind of like fertile ground. But then I started listening to these teachings from Miles Monroe, and my YouTube just started recommending him randomly. Like, I think it was the Holy Spirit, because of the fact that usually what YouTube recommends is like cop videos and political problems. It's just always trying to gaslight me and infuriate me. But it's all of a sudden like, oh, here's some teachings from this pastor, and I was like, okay, let's listen. And what he teaches primarily is the kingdom as a concept. Like, in America, our government is this constitutional republic, but a kingdom, like, here's God, he's the king, the head guy, and he has his whole place. And then earth is like a colony, right? And we always think of a colony as like a bad thing, that we're over here taking away people's, traditions and whatever. And that's a talk for another time. But the idea of bringing your country's influence and rulership and customs, that's what God is doing with the earth. He's brought, it's like the Lord's Prayer. He says, your will be done on earth just as it is in heaven. So that's what he's doing. He's bringing his influence down from heaven onto the earth. And so that implication is that, I've kind of lost my train of thought. The point is that, we have a different version of reality that we live in, and the principalities, the forces that are evil that are running the world are actively at work trying to prevent us from discovering this stuff. The true shape of the earth, our true identity, the millennial kingdom and such. And what Miles Monroe was teaching was this concept of the kingdom. So I had in my mind what a kingdom was and what God was trying to do. And right on the heels of that, I discovered this. I think it was the first documentary I watched was The Lost History of Flat Earth from Ewar. And there's more to be said about that guy and his series. But that particular piece in and of itself, I thought was really fantastic. It's like 5 hours. It establishes the millennial kingdom theory without calling it that. Just simply showing the buildings, showing the impossibilities of it, asking a lot of questions. And that was right on the heels of thinking like Jesus is a man who God sent here to become king of the earth and to fix all of our problems, restore us, and all these things. And then he died and was resurrected. And then there's more obviously about his return and establishment of his kingdom. But I knew about the idea, and then I saw it, like as archaeology. I saw the buildings, I saw the canals, I saw the star forts, and it was just like, anybody else, you know, it goes from being just like this ethereal concept, like God's kingdom somewhere in the universe, to being very real. It's not just an idea anymore. Like there are the buildings, there's evidence everywhere. And that makes Christianity like radical. It's not just an idea or a religion. It's like Lord of the Rings, man. And it's
Well,
real.
yeah, it takes away the faith element. It's kind of like, who needs faith when you can actually see it?
Yeah.
It's kind of, and I do get a lot of messages from people saying, this has really brought them around to Christianity. They can finally see it. They finally get the point, and they understand what the point of it all was. That whole, well, it's been 2,000 years. Where's the promise of his coming, guys? Right?
Right.
And people say it's kind of like, and I saw this really smug stand-up comedian, and there's a little story to this. I might as well tell it. But there was this back in like 2018, during the height of Jordan Peterson. I went to go and see him because he was in London. And I thought, go on then. Let's go watch the guy, And I liked a lot of what he was saying in the olden days. Clean your room, get some responsibility, take on all that sort of stuff. Where he's
Bread and
going,
butter.
where he's going now, Christianity without Christ is a bit of a, well, whatever, there's a lot to be said about that. It doesn't matter. The point was,
I got
the,
off on the
yeah,
conversation.
yeah, it's a whole other thing. At the back of this show, though, I ended up being in a bar with the people who just went to watch him, and they were all talking to each other. And I ended up meeting this guy. He was called Tom. I won't say his last name. Anyway, he was a proper trust fund, stuck up, upper middle class kid who's had a silver spoon in his mouth his entire life, pretentious Oxford, just there's this type in England, and I'm a northern working class, traveled down to the south for this show, completely removed personality, and I ended up talking to him for ages because he got onto about, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm a manager at a supermarket and I run this YouTube channel as well. And he was like he was making fun of me the entire night, asking questions about conspiracies and what I believe. And I was just telling him straight, I don't care who this guy is. Who is he? He's a nobody,
Yeah.
like,
Never seen him again.
and we were in this back and forth about it all. Anyway, he went away, whatever, and my mate Adam, who was with me, he was like, that guy was just the worst, because he studied at Oxford University and he's from where I'm from. He's like, I meet people like him all the time, like, they're just so detached from reality because they're just in this Oxford bubble, and it's kind of, anyway, it turns out I ended up following him on Instagram and I still get images coming up. It turns out he's a stand-up comedian now, and he goes around actually doing shows in that London southern comedic bubble, extremely left-wing liberal ideology bubble. You only can only tell those type of jokes in that area, and it's always
Sure.
it's always like just typical. They all have the same jokes. I went to go watch actually a stand-up show in that region while I was down there, and one act came on after the other, saying the same, ribbing into the same political figures, the right-wingers, so-called, the neo-Nazis as they claim. It's kind of, they're all just this. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, I saw that he was also mentioning people who believe in God. So he's anti-Christian rhetoric on. And I just saw him say, like,
Surprise.
he's like, and he's like doing this stand-up show now, and he's like, so at what point does Christ not seem to be more like a guy, a father who went out to get a pack of cigarettes and never came back? Like he was feeding off that idea. Well, it's been 2,000 years, guys. Where is he? He's kind of comparing into a deadbeat dad who made all these promises and then disappeared. You know what I mean? It's kind of the issue is the mainstream narrative does make people think and feel like that. So though he's a pretentious, so I'm not going to swear, so he is what he is, but at the same time, he is like that because there has been this prominent doctrine around which has said it has been 2,000 years and we're still waiting. So can you be surprised that people like that are telling these jokes in a stand-up setting to thousands of people and perpetuating this idea, and this millennial
Yeah,
kingdom theory contextualized it in a whole other way. Like it
they
takes.
had a religious movement about they call it the Great Disappointment. I can't remember whose religious movement it was. It might have been Adventists or Mormons or somebody, but they had a prophecy that Christ was going to return, and then it didn't happen because it had already happened. I mean, this was like in the 1800s. It had already happened already.
Mm.
And so then their response was to just celebrate that it didn't happen forever. Like instead of saying, no, the prophet was false, or, this religion is a joke, they just decided to celebrate the disappointment every year forever after that. Very strange.
It's- but for me, as somebody who wasn't raised in a church, those were issues I had as a more atheistic thinker in my edgy 13-year-old years. As I got older, I got more spiritual. It's I am a god rather than there is a god type of leanings. It's all consciousness, man. We're all God collectively. All that type of thing. But the big issue for me were these major stumbling blocks, like, well, how long are we supposed to wait? Exactly. When this theory came along, I mean, my faith was already solidified because I've had personal experiences which I just can't deny, which I already knew it was true. But there's things I did have to take on faith, and I was willing to take them on faith because I already had enough proof prior to this, from my own spiritual experiences, the demonic attacks, the spiritual warfare stuff. It's like, okay, so it's very real, and Jesus is on our side, thank God, It's that type of thing. But then when this millennial kingdom topic came, I sat in it for so long because it's kind of like, do I talk about this? Because I mean,
Yeah.
what would be the impact? I don't want to split the focus of my channel. I'm the Nephilim clown guy. I don't want to start talking about like major eschatological paradigm shifting things necessarily. But
Yeah.
I'd watched the Tartarian movement grow for so long. This anti-god take on the whole thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
That kind of goes around in circles and then gives way too much power to the enemy, as the people who can reset everything at a moment's notice, and it's kind of, but then there's
The
this,
wheel type thing.
yeah, no, but then there's this huge Gnostic contingent growing in the truth movement as well, co-opting and parasitically taking over the gospel truth and the Christian perspective, and it's kind of becoming a bit too philosophical. It's all becoming a little bit too symbolic now. It's all becoming a little bit too interpretive and all over the place. And I realize if we talk about the millennial kingdom topic and no, there's a physical kingdom that really happened, you could touch it, you could feel it, you could live in it.
Still there,
I
you
realized
know.
that could perhaps revive that passion for the
Mhm.
Christian truth in the truth of movement, because it was starting to just fade away and big players were literally dying. Like dying, like Michael Heiser and Rob Skiba and this, they were just disappearing from death. Like, and these were big voices, that kind of pushed the Christian perspective. It's kind of like, well, who's gonna carry on that? And the internet's a big place, but it's kind of all you need is just one voice saying it, and it gets projected because that's how God works, And I found
Yeah.
talking about this millennial kingdom thing seems to have revived the Christian passion in ways I just didn't foresee. I'm not saying I'm not the be all end all of this theory. I'm just literally some guy who doesn't know how to shut up. But it's kind of, you find, and again,
Oh,
more and more people are turning to the Christian perspective for answers because it's not philosophy anymore. It's not faith. It's not speculation, or
it's archaeology.
it's
It's
literally, it's tangible.
yeah.
And I think that's what people need, because the typical atheist rhetoric is, well, if I can't see it, why should I believe it? What,
Yeah.
you want to see
Well,
it?
there's a lot of stuff too, like I mentioned, the first documentary I watched about Tartaria, not that I hadn't heard of the idea, but the first time I actually sat through was that Iwar Anon guy,
Yeah.
5 hours. And he, at some point, actually took back all of his, he kind of recanted everything he said.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to have a channel with another guy. I think they're called Conspiracy Graduates or something like that, which to me, that's kind of an arrogant name. Conspiracy Graduates. I don't know how you've learned it all already. But anyway, their idea was that oh, this is actually a plan. Like the discovery of Tartaria, Millennial Kingdom, all the old photos coming out is actually like a liberal false utopia ideology that they're trying to propagate on people, to give everybody these ideas that humanity was once this unified kingdom so that they can present to us a new fraudulent version of that and say this is the new one world order of humanity, and it's all esoteric and pretty like these old buildings and stuff. And I don't know. I just think it's worth addressing that if you don't, it's like I talked about how Miles Monroe and the teachings about the kingdom as a concept was so valuable for me entering into this stuff because I mean that's one of the reasons I resonated so much with your channel was you were saying things that were just your ruminations and what was coming out of your mouth was the same thing that was going through my head. It's like, well, why is Jesus on all the buildings? If it's, if it's just some sort of secular utopia or some sort of Mongol kingdom or something like it. There's all these different ways to explain it away as just, oh, even if it is that our history is a lie, it's not that Jesus is cool or anything. You know what I mean? There's this concerted effort to analyze the buildings and the concept and the conspiracy, but ignore Jesus altogether. Well, here he is, like on the statues, on the artwork, he's on all the walls. It's like, well, who is that guy then? You know? So for me, it was pretty easy, right? You look at all this evidence and you're like, oh, that's what the kingdom looks like. What's even more amazing is I've heard people had near-death experiences where they saw heaven and they describe it as looking like ancient Rome. They're like, oh, it has the columns with the Ionic columns and the streets are all beautiful. And it's like, that's probably because the architecture is inspired, like whatever we have on Earth is inspired. I think you guys were talking about it the other day, like Michelangelo being like the Archangel Michael potentially. And it's like, I mean, I spent the last week at my job painting the bathrooms and the ceilings and everything. And I've got a paintbrush and I'm painting the ceiling. I'm like, how did they do this, man? There's like some artwork on the ceiling of some of these cathedrals. It's like immaculate and perfect. It's like, dude, there's no way. Your back would hurt so bad. It would take you like 100 years to paint that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was Vinny B who was talking about that concept of the angels were also here with the saints during the reign, helping helping build out the infrastructure, basically, and create a kingdom on earth that represents the kingdom in heaven. And I'm still in the realm of I don't have all the answers of the mechanics specifically how this went down. I just know it did go down. How exactly is completely up for speculation because we're just not privy to that information. It's been hidden from us. We can only infer from what we see. And when you do see that all of these cathedrals are named after specific saints or angels, like Mont Saint Michael, for example, you've got to wonder, haven't you? It's okay, maybe something was going on there. And you were saying there, people have these visions of heaven, see Corinthian pillars, and they see these like something like Rome, and I'm still open to the possibility that, okay, well, if Jesus wasn't literally walking around coordinating the building effort, and didn't have a specific kingdom in the middle of Earth that was a physical floating whatever, like people can go and make pilgrimage to. Though I do think that probably actually was what happened. It's described, I think, in Zechariah that people would make pilgrimages to Zion, and those who didn't would get droughts. Who in heaven gets droughts?
Right.
It's just supposed to be a heavenly kingdom. No, it was a real physical place at one point, in some way that people could get to through means, whatever that is, whether that's zeppelins or canals that were built, perhaps that all go north in a certain way. I don't know, but I'm open to the idea that okay, maybe it is just spiritual and he's only reigning in heaven. He's just in heaven, in the heavenly kingdom. That's where he reigns now at the right hand of God. You know what I mean? And that's it. Even then, if he's on the throne in heaven and Satan isn't around for 1,000 years in the physical realm on earth, humanity with resurrected physical bodied saints can achieve a lot. And it would look something like this thing, this history that we see everywhere, this architecture, this built out world full of mansions everywhere that have no business being around, considering the populations that were around and the workforce and the skills and the capabilities these people are supposed to have had. And it's kind of so whether he was physically reigning or spiritually reigning, the earth during that 1,000-year period of peace under his reign would still look like this, like we're pointing to. And so that's kind of my stance on it, but people want to argue about, well, actually what people argue with me about are very ignorant points half the time, because they don't know that there is a 1,000-year reign that ends. They think Christ returns, eternity forever, wonderful peace, heavenly kingdom forever.
I didn't even know about the millennial reign until like a couple years ago. I'd never heard about it in church or anything.
Yeah, because I get a comment saying this is not the new heaven and new earth. It's like, I literally didn't say it was. Did you listen? No. Did you listen to it?
Maybe soon enough, but yeah,
maybe
we're not there yet. Well, you know what I mean. Maybe soon. I mean, I wish it was soon.
Well, I'm not one for saying I'm not a date setter. I think that would just make me
Oh, me neither.
just as bad as the Rapture people that came before.
Yeah. I mean, more like a question, like maybe soon, you know?
Maybe, well, yeah, maybe. How again,
Where do
I'm still sticking to the how long's a piece of string argument for the little season because I don't want to make such predictions and then make people do stupid things based on them because I just don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who aren't Christian who are in this alternative history place, who are spouting dates when the next reset's gonna happen, and it's kind of those people are charlatans. All right.
Yeah, you don't want to sell anything unless it's like actually something. Like for instance, like with the book you've done, you put in all this work and you've created something to give to people. Like that's kind of what I try to do with Sunday service is to give what I do have. I'm not the master of anything. I'm expert of nothing. I'm kind of more like an index. I always try to point people to channels like yours for the thing that you're the authority on. The only thing I really know how to talk about is because I understand it. So that's exactly what I'm getting at. It's like nobody has you can't package and say, I do know, here's the facts, now buy my thing. You know what I mean? So it's nice. Have you ever heard of console commands? Do you know about that terminology? Like in Bethesda, like if, for instance, like video games, Fallout, Skyrim, etc.
Yeah, I've used a few.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I kind of wanted to make sure I brought this up today before we ran out of time. Because JT talks a lot about the Fallout and Bethesda games and stuff and how they are correlating to our reality where they like program stuff in. Like with Skyrim, they've got like the Dwemer, the lost dwarven race who like disappeared and left all their buildings everywhere and it's all weird.
Just
Anyway,
stopping you there quickly. It's funny you just brought this up because when we were talking earlier, I had a vision in my mind of Half-Life 2. Did you ever play Half-Life?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just thinking about that video game and like, is the Combine supposed to be a piss take of Christian authority over the earth, which is I was just thinking about it in my mind. I thought maybe that's a video for another time. And now here you are talking about video games and the symbolic references. But carry on.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll try to keep it brief and maybe on another time we'll get more into it. But the idea of the console commands being that a Bethesda game is never truly done. They're always adding to it,
Yeah.
Skyrim, Fallout, whatever. And so
Yeah.
they've got the developer console, and you pull that up and you enter certain commands. I started to think about the world like this. Like, here's the earth. God created it. It has systems, networks, everything has a cycle. There's the way the water moves, it becomes clouds and then rains. And, everything is integrated. God really did a good job. And it's just like a program where there is an administrator authority. So Christ says to the people, if you have faith as a mustard seed, and you say to this mountain, move from here to there, it will move. In Skyrim or Fallout, if you need to increase the running speed of your character, you type in the little code. It's like player set AV speed, whatever. And you press the enter button, and at no point do you question, will that affect my character's running speed? As long as you know you have the proper code and the authority to enter the code. And when we look at the millennial kingdom and how vast and complicated it is, I sometimes think that part of its construction was not necessarily done by hand at all, but that maybe some very high-end, righteous, resurrected saints may have had the access to the developer console, so to speak, that the world itself has certain commands that can be used to move a mountain from here to there. And just like with any kind of console, there are two aspects. There's the code itself, knowing the code to enter into the console, but also having the authority to access it. I think that you could learn the code, but if you don't have the authority, it won't work. And you may have the authority, but you don't have the code. You see how, like, where we are in this fallen state of the world, it would be very difficult to manifest a star fort by hand. How could we do that? Excavators, lasers, I don't know. But what if you could just make it happen? What if you could just command it to happen? And I can't speak to whether or not that's true. But when Christ says you can move a mountain, I mean, that's an incredible amount of earth to move from one place to another. And to simply just say so, I mean, that's the implication, is that if you're in the proper alignment, you have to have faith as a mustard seed, which isn't very much. He uses something small to describe it. So maybe that's part of it. Like that the kingdom was designed and built using the same framework, the same assets that are built into the program itself. Like if you spawn any sword in the game in Skyrim, it's drawing from an asset bank that already exists in the program. So it's possible that the reason all of these buildings and the star cities and everything, they look a certain way, like snowflakes and stuff, because they're drawing from the asset pack that is the Earth.
Hmm.
Anyway, just something I wanted to talk about today before we ran
Well,
out of time.
that's exactly the type of psychedelic I know reality actually is. Okay. Yes, I agree with you. I think that probably is possible. And for the phraseology of you can literally move mountains if you just believe hard enough. That's the word. That's the
Obviously, we have to be in the right world state. Like I would imagine
yeah.
right now, the Lord's got the console turned off or in some way limited because it's Satan's little season, right? It's not like
Yeah.
let's just figure it out and usurp him immediately like that.
We better not
That
let him
kind of
have access to God
purpose,
mode anytime soon. Let's
right?
just shut
Yeah,
that down for a minute.
waiting on him.
I,
So
I agree. No, but I agree with obviously Christ has the keys to the kingdom. Once he was there, I'm sure he opened the gates and says, "Okay, play, create,
mhm.
go." You're as God yourself. Go. Like, I've given you all authority through me to do everything that you are capable of doing. And I do believe the saints, the resurrected saints, were probably living in 9 dimensions, just making up a number there. I'm not saying there are 9 dimensions, but you know what I mean? They were probably seeing things on levels we just do not understand. And again, tapping into the source code if you want to get all simile about it and using computers as your metaphor, but it is kind of like that in a way. And we know, if you've been in the game long enough of conspiracy, even quantum physics is catching up to the idea of it. Well, it seems like a bit of a simulation to me. It seems to have all this code and this math which is unchangeable and laws and rules which seem to have a coder of some kind. And it's kind of this is just like a video game, but more complex. It's kind of like
Right.
particles are just bits, and it's kind of, oh, what do you know? It's all kind of, it is a simulation. But that's
Yeah.
that's a way of describing God's creation without God. Oh, it must just be a simulation. It's kind of, no,
Right.
that's the creation. It's
Yep.
God's creation. That's the thing. But then if you want to, I think again, that's the Matrix. Obviously, has really become a popular symbol in our
Hmm.
movements, especially the Gnostic types who want to believe that we're nothing but batteries, a huge energy farm for nefarious entities who want to drain us for everything, and the whole world is just an illusion by an evil prison keeper demiurge god who wants to keep us trapped here in our flesh prisons rather than letting us be free to our full potential. The Matrix does help you get that kind of Gnostic worldview, sure, but the truth is this is the beautiful creation God created for us, and he wanted us to be stewards over it and to go forth and multiply and live in abundance through it, but we messed up, you
Yeah,
know.
we did. But isn't it great that he loves us so much and that he's so faithful that even in all of our failings and shortcomings, he still sees it fit to give his only son to die for our sins so that we can be restored. What a great thing. Very selfless. It's love in example. I always say that the purpose for all of this was so that God could create love. I don't know if I'm right about that, but love is freely given. So if you're in this perfect heavenly kingdom and God says, "Go here and do this," you just do it. Not doing it is out of sight, out of mind. It's not even an idea. But if God asks you to do something and you choose to do it because you love him, there's value in that. And the only way you can choose is if there's the ability to rebel. So I look at the world, I see all this brokenness, even Satan's kingdom, and people ask, well, why would God allow all this? Why would God let Satan do all this? And it's like, if we only understood that that's the cost, you know what I mean? How can God have a heavenly family of people who love each other, who choose to follow him, who choose to value each other and his kingdom and his creation, and to value our true identities? How can we do that if we don't have the ability to not do that?
Mhm.
As tragic as it is. I even think about it like I have a little diatribe. I don't know if it's on Sunday service, maybe it will be, but about this idea I call sympathy for the devil. And it's basically, I mean, I didn't create that, but it's like the idea that there was a time in heaven where he did everything he was supposed to do, everything God told him to do. He's like head musician. So he's like playing the songs of worship to God. And then something happens, right? And he's not doing that anymore. And he has a pivotal role to play in creating this rebellion against God. And it's sad. It's like God has to lose his main guy in order to get all of us. Like that, this people think that like this is all just our struggle. Like, oh, here we are suffering because we don't have yellow trucks from year 2000 or whatever it is, like whatever it is that we're lacking that we wish we had. But it's like, think about like what the profound lack it must be for God to see all the people who don't choose to follow him, all the people who have life and freedom and all the things that they have every day is a blessing. They draw air, two eyes, a nose, ears, whatever, working hands, and people take that for granted because they don't think about the author of all of it. That would be pretty sad to be. Somebody told me that if you look at all the old artwork of Christ, he almost looks kind of sad. All the paintings on the buildings, he looks almost kind of disappointed. And it's like, it's just art. It probably doesn't mean anything. But maybe the face of Christ ruling the world for 1,000 years is the face of a guy who knows that's just a sliver of eternity and that a lot more bad stuff has to happen before it can all be solved. Like, I don't know. I can see why somebody like Jesus would feel bad that he couldn't just win everybody. But if he did it by force, we'd all be slaves. So what do you do? It's a crazy thing, man.
That's a great answer to the if God exists, why bad things happen argument. It's something we kind of have to deal with quite a lot, isn't it, as people who are talking about Jesus. And it's kind of my rebuttal is usually something like, you wouldn't like a God who told you what to do all the time and didn't let you micromanage your life, should we say. Didn't give you the freedom to make mistakes. You wouldn't like that. You would hate him. You would never want to follow it. You do everything you can to rebel and make it worse and just get away. And in a way, even maybe the devil has free will too. He can make those choices. It's kind of everyone gets a fair shot at it. And even the Taoists understand you can't really have good without a concept of bad. You wouldn't know what it meant to have love and compassion if you hadn't experienced hatred and envy to compare it to. You wouldn't know what hot was if you'd never experienced cold as a comparison. And again, the Taoist philosophy is very much all about the code, the matrix, the nature of reality and the design and the creation itself and how it works and the dynamics, and again, just remove the creator from the equation. That's all they're doing. But there is something to be said for that concept, and I think God does play by those rules in a sense, and it's kind of, you wouldn't know the kingdom was worth it if you hadn't experienced hell first.
I guess it's like I talk about it with like justice. Like how could a guy know what justice was if they hadn't seen and experienced injustice? C.S. Lewis has a quote about it, about a line like, without having seen a straight line, how could one know that a line was crooked, or something like that.
Did you listen to his lectures as well? They used to do on the radio.
I mean, I have definitely heard them over the years, some of the famed quotes, but at the end of the day, it's like I kind of consider myself an expert of nothing. Like throughout my life, I've just with that whole I never really knew what I wanted to do or where I fit in the world. I've always just kind of dabbled in everything. So Christianity and like the theologians and the great teachers are something that up until the last couple of years I basically ignored completely. So the last few years have been a really cool experience of getting to like hear all this stuff that everybody else has already heard, but it's all so fresh to me. It's really cool.
There's a great channel called CS Doodle, I think it's called, or something like that, and he basically takes C.S. Lewis's lectures where he's talking about biblical concepts, and he draws it as he's talking in like white pen on a blackboard. So I think it's called CS Doodle or C.S. Lewis Doodle or something like that. And I recommend anybody who's trying to tackle these profound questions that often atheistic minds have, about Christ and the nature of God. He has a good crack at them. C.S. Lewis has writing upon writing upon writings, trying to tackle these hard questions. And this guy's done a great job of actually drawing out everything he's saying with little people and, and these type of questions. These things we're talking about, probably not that well. He has done a fantastic job. And there's people can argue at the end of the day whether C.S. Lewis is above board or not. Who knows? But I think for the time,
anyone of us above board, well, like he who has never sinned cast the first stone, I guess.
Exactly.
Get there.
I think his intentions were good, personally, when it comes to C.S. Lewis.
I think that's our focus, right? The heart. Because even somebody like Miles Monroe, he's like my favorite teacher, and all I ever think about is like, what would it have been if he had seen it? He was always preaching the kingdom, but he didn't see what we've seen. Like, we've been blessed in that we're still alive post 2014 when he passed. If he was alive today, I'm sure he would be right on this with us.
I bet he would. I mean, it's a big topic, isn't it, this? And I don't think it's going away anytime soon, the millennial kingdom stuff. it's a paradigm shifter. And I've been in the game for a while, the conspiracy game, and so have you, and you see these topics come along every now and then, but I've always considered them like, well, they're just like fads. Flat Earth, interesting, fascinating, big deception, sure. A lot of stuff we still don't understand or know thoroughly about how the nature of the cosmology works and everything. But you get to a point where it's like, okay, I've heard it all now. There's not much more I can really do with it, and it is what it is type of thing. You move on, don't you? But and then like Mandela effect turns up, and the validity of that is still up for debate, whether it's even a real thing or not, and all that type of thing. But when it came about, it was a bit of a fad conspiracy for a few months. Everyone was on it. Everyone was making videos about it, discussing the concepts, getting really deep about it. I think I saw one video of a guy saying the only thing that could cause such ripples through time is Jesus Christ's return. And as we get closer and closer to his return, that impact has rippled backwards in time to us now and has changed things. And he's preparing us internally and making our organs change to make us hardy, to prepare us for the thing that's coming next, to make us survive tribulation. It's like, okay, you're getting a bit wild with those speculations now. It's kind of, that's what people were doing. They were reading so much into these things and making up these ideas and concepts. And I'm not saying I'm much better with this millennial kingdom theory because I'm doing the same thing, in a way. But there's something about this topic which doesn't feel like a fad. It's not like a here today, gone tomorrow, people will get bored of it situation. I think we're literally just scratching the surface of this thing, and I described in the last show as it's kind of like we're in this pitch black underground tomb that's just a vast cavernous space, and upon the walls of this cavern is this story written out that we know nothing about, and we're there with a little candle, a tea light, going up to each etching an image and saying, okay, so what's this? And we can't see the big picture, no matter how hard we try and look at each individual thing, And it's kind of like, well, the more people are getting involved and each holding a candle, the brighter that cavern's going to get. And the more we're going to start to get a holistic picture of what really went on here. And it's kind of there's true mystery with this one, because with like those other topics, like I've got it all figured out, I know what's going on, and it's kind of like these are literally the mysteries of heaven here, what we're discussing. This is the mystery of the kingdom, the things we just can't comprehend, and I just don't see this topic going away. And this is coming from my expert opinion as someone who's observed the movement for over a decade. This is. And it's the vitriol from the naysayers which tells me this is a big deal. Because in the past, it was like, kind of, Christians were all for the flat earth because it's biblical cosmology. You didn't have many Christians out there saying, no, that's all lies, that's wrong, that's false doctrine, you're going to hell for saying something like that. Most Christians are like, yeah, well, that's what it says in Enoch and Genesis, I guess, the people used to believe it was flat, so it's possible. A lot of Christians are open to the idea of it, biblical cosmology, it is what it is, But this topic, no, like, it's divided the whole thing. It is separated, and it's kind of, this is a make or break whether you're a part of my church or not type of thing, This is one of those, and I did not.
It's about time we have some division. I know it sounds dumb to say that, but we got to figure out who we are. You know what I mean? We're always changing the rules. Let's figure out where the real line is. You know what I mean? Even if that means giving up things we thought were true.
Absolutely.
I'm willing to do it.
Absolutely. Right. Well, we're at 1 hour 45 minutes, so we've been almost at the 2 hour mark now. Probably a good time to start closing this down a little bit, coming to a bit of an end. We've got 250 people here watching, which is amazing. I think George popped in for a little minute there. JC popped in to say hi. It was great to see him as well. So yeah, great turnout. I hope this brings more people to your channel. I hope they get to know you, can listen to your talks, listen to your Sunday service on a weekly basis. It's good listening, and I think you talk about things we can all relate to, which is great. So
I'm so grateful for the opportunity, Paul. I really am.
No problem at all. Like I said, this is what it's all about. I like networking. I like reaching out, and this is a therapy session. This is your chance to talk and listen, and it's not just for me and you. It's for the people listening. They need to hear that they're not alone, and there's plenty of us out there thinking the exact same things they're thinking and looking into the exact same things they're looking into. Because it can feel isolating out there when you're out in the world, because it doesn't seem like anybody knows this stuff or thinks about it, but that's just not true. So do you have any closing statements you want to make? Is there anything you want to promote or let people know about on your own channel? I'll give it to you for a little bit.
Sure. I won't take up too much of your time. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I would say something like good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter what time of day it is that you're receiving this message, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for being here at the Truth or Therapy sessions brought to you by Understanding Conspiracy Channel and Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. You guys can check out my channel, youtube.com, The Cult of Khan. We do a Sunday service teaching every Sunday, and this is just the regular ruminations. It's an alternative to a regular church service. We're willing to talk about things there that might be a little bit weird, might be a little bit different than what you're used to. So definitely feel free to drop in, take a listen. We've got 18 episodes so far, so that's nearly 9 hours of sermons at this time. And then also coming up in the near future, there are 2 tracks out right now, but we also have the Christ Supremacist album, which I am producing by myself. So it is taking a little more time than I wish, but it's also a labor of love. So this album is dedicated to Christ and the idea of absolute allegiance to his kingdom. So keep an eye out for that. It will be available on all major platforms and will also be available to the Patreons, which is patreon.com / the cult of Khan, if any of you guys are interested in financially supporting. Again, I'm Khan Man. This is the Cult of Khan, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for
And
joining
thank
me.
you for having me, Paul.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
And by the way, guys, I listened to Exceda, one of his recent releases. It actually slaps. It's like it's got a really good beat to it. I was listening to this thinking, this is a jam. Like this is actually a serious jam. So go and check out his music. Yeah, yeah.
Let's go.
That's it. Yeah, go and check out his music, guys. It's definitely worth it. And Connor, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. We'll definitely have you back on in the future. And don't be a stranger. I'll always be listening to your weekly sermon, like I usually do. Guys, links down below. I think also his name is hyperlinked as well. If you want to go check that out, you can easily go and see that. But yeah, guys, go and check out the Cult of Khan. Connor, thanks for doing this. And as always, everyone, God bless.
Thank you.